Hey, if you have a Bible, if you'll turn to Luke 9, and we're going to start in verses 28 through 36. Are you doing well today? It's great to see you this morning, and we're going to continue our series, Kairos. And that word Kairos simply means a time when conditions are right for the accomplishment of a crucial action. And so throughout this series, we're looking at key moments in the life and ministry of Christ. And there are so many things in the life of Jesus and throughout his ministry that you and I could discuss. There's countless things, but John writes in this, in John 21, verse 25, Jesus also did many other things. If they were all written down, I suppose the whole world could not contain the books that would be written. And so in this series, we are focusing on some of the pivotal and impactful moments in the life of Christ. And last week, we talked about the baptism of Jesus. And today, we're going to dive into the transfiguration of Jesus. But before we get there, it's important to understand what has taken place before we get to Luke 9:28. Peter has declared Jesus to be the Messiah sent from God. Jesus has also warned the disciples of his upcoming suffering and of his upcoming death. But then he also says that if you follow me, that you will experience moments and times of suffering as well. And so from that moment to our passage, about a week has gone by, and Jesus takes Peter, James, and John, three of his disciples, to pray with him. And they're still processing from everything that Jesus has talked about. They're still wondering what this really means in its entirety. And it's here that there's a Kairos moment that takes place in the life of Jesus, where he's transfigured before their eyes. Now, that word transfigured is the Greek word metamorpho, and it simply means to change into another form. And as Jesus is changed, as he's transformed in their presence, they are given a glimpse of his heavenly glory. They are able to see that this is God in human flesh. This is the fulfillment of what Isaiah would prophesy when he would say that his name shall be called Emmanuel, God with us. They are going to experience that in this moment. But not only that, Jesus is confirming that he is the one that has stepped down from heaven to be the suffering servant and Son of God that came to earth to save humanity. Many scholars believe that the Transfiguration is the most significant event between his baptism and between his death. This is a key moment in the life of Christ. But not only is it a key moment in the life of Christ, but it can be a key moment for us as well this morning. Because regardless of what life has looked like for you, regardless of what has transpired in your life, regardless of the things that you are facing in your life today, we have one that came to earth to die for us and that was raised to life for us so that our lives can be transformed, so that our lives can be changed. You don't have to leave this place the same as you came in. Amen. Jesus desires to change you. And Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 3:17 and 18, For the Lord is the Spirit, and wherever the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. So all of us who have had that veil removed can see and reflect the glory of the Lord. And the Lord, who is the Spirit, makes us more and more like him as we are changed into his glorious image. And as we are transformed by Christ, this is what happens in our lives. You and I reflect his glory to other people. In other words, Jesus doesn't just change you so that you stay the same. Jesus changes you so that you reflect what he's done to other people. But as we look at our passage, I believe there are three reasons why the transfiguration of Christ is a key moment for us. And number one, if you're taking notes, this was a moment of invitation. I want to look at verses 28 and 29. Luke writes, About 8 days later, Jesus took Peter, John, and James up on a mountain to pray. And as he was praying, the appearance of his face was transformed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Again, Peter, James, and John, they've traveled with Jesus up to a mountain to pray. And in Scripture, mountains were significant of moments where people would meet with and they would have an experience with God. Moses, he would be given the 10 Commandments and experience God's presence in the form of a cloud. Not only that, but God's glory would pass by Moses at a mountain. Elijah, he would find rest and be encouraged in God's presence whenever he had experienced a really difficult season of life where he was ready to give up on ministry, where he was ready to give up on life, but he experienced God's presence on a mountain where he was able to be encouraged and find rest. And Jesus, being God, he knew exactly what was about to transpire at this mountain and on this moment. But notice what he does. He takes John, he takes Peter, he takes James with him to pray on this mountain where he would be transformed. And as Jesus prays, the appearance of his face is transformed and his clothes become dazzling white. It's this transfiguration moment that we see. And Jesus is giving them a glimpse or an invitation to see him in a way they had never seen him before. They were able to see a glimpse of his glory and of his holiness. And this transfiguration moment, it was a moment of invitation so the disciples could see who Jesus really was. That he was a holy God that came to change people. That this holy God that came down from heaven to earth, that he simply came to change people. Now think about a time whenever you received an invitation for whatever it was, whether that was a graduation, whether that was a party, whether it was some type of event. And now I don't know if you've been like us, but through the course of our life, we've gotten a lot of invitations. And there's some that because of the significance or within our time schedule, we just threw the invitation away, but it came to backfire on us because the people said, "Why didn't you come?" And we simply said, "Because we lost the invitation." We wanted to be nice to them in the moment. But there's also moments where we receive an invitation, and because of the significance of the moment, we accept the invite. Because that invitation means that you're given access to somebody's life that you could not otherwise have access to unless you received the invitation. And notice with Jesus, he's always extending an invitation for people to have an experience with him. And you and I this morning, we're given access to his life that can change our life. I mean, just think for a moment about who is extending the invitation for us to have a deeper experience with him. It is this holy God that invited the disciples, that invited Moses, that invited Elijah. That same holy God is inviting us to come up the mountain with him, closer to himself. And in doing so, you and I can experience life change. But it's only when we come to him, not with who we want to be, but as we are, that we open up our lives for Jesus to change us. It's not coming to him thinking that we have to have it all together. It's not about coming to him thinking that I've got to cross every T, that I've got to dot every I, that I've got to live perfect. No. It's simply coming to Jesus as you are. Because when you come to Jesus as you are, you see him as he is. You see that he is a holy God that loves you, that wants to change you, that doesn't want to leave you the way that you are, but he wants to make you new this morning. He wants to change your life. And just as Jesus wanted his disciples to experience him in his glory and in his holiness, that same God desires for you to experience him in his holiness and desires for you to experience him in his glory. Not so that you can stay the same and go back to life as it is. Not so that you can just come to this 11:30 experience and leave and that's it and nothing changes about your life. No, the significance of having an experience with God is that we don't stay the same. Is that our lives are changed. Our lives are transformed. We're no longer who we used to be. Why? Because of the power of Jesus. And the goal this morning is for us to experience Jesus and who he is so that we can live different. But notice, Jesus doesn't ask for perfection from us. He simply just wants us to experience him. He knows that you have flaws this morning. He knows the sin issue in your life. He knows the struggles that you carry throughout your life. He knows the marriage problems. He knows all of the situations pertaining to your life. And in this moment, he's not asking for you to pick yourself up and clean yourself off. He simply wanting you to have a moment with him that could change your life forever. Why is this a key moment for us? Because a holy God invites us to live a changed life. That's the significance of it, that a holy God desires to change us. So not only was the Transfiguration a moment of invitation, but it was also a moment of revelation, and that's our second point. Verses 29 and 34 tell us, and as Jesus was praying, the appearance of his face was transformed, and his clothes became dazzling white. And suddenly 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared and began talking with Jesus. They were glorious to see, and they were speaking about his exodus from this world, which was about to be fulfilled in Jerusalem. Peter and the others had fallen asleep, and when they woke up, they saw Jesus' glory and the 2 men standing with him. As Moses and Elijah were starting to leave, Peter, not even knowing what he was saying, blurted out, "Master, it's wonderful for us to be here. Let's make 3 shelters as memorials, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But even as he was saying this, a cloud overshadowed them, and terror gripped them as the cloud covered them. Moses and Elijah, they appear, and they're talking to Jesus. And this is a really important moment in history because Moses was the first to introduce the law. Elijah, who was a prophet, he turned people's hearts back to their covenant with God. And this is the revealing of Jesus as the fulfillment of the law, but also Jesus as a fulfillment of the prophets. Simply put, this shows that Jesus is greater than Moses, that Jesus is greater than Elijah. And as Elijah, Moses, and Jesus are talking, it's here that they discuss his exodus. Now that word exodus in the Greek, it means departure. So what they're talking about is this departure that would accomplish or fulfill the redemptive work of God through Jesus' suffering and through Jesus' death. But as these incredible things are going on, Peter, James, and John, the 3 guys that have followed Jesus for a few years at this point, they're doing something very spiritual. They're taking a nap. I mean, think about it. Jesus is transformed. Moses and Elijah is there, and they're in the middle of their sleep. They're tired. And Peter, being the one to always open up his mouth, being the one to always make some suggestions that he ends up regretting later, he says, hey, this is great that Moses and Elijah and Jesus, that you're here. So why don't we just build shelters? But what he was doing is putting Jesus on equal footing with Moses and Elijah. This is the same guy that back in Luke 9, earlier in that chapter, he is declaring Jesus as the Messiah sent from God. But now in this moment, because he's not even fully aware of what is taking place, he's putting Jesus on equal footing with Moses and Elijah. And all the while, they're missing that something greater is taking place. This transfiguration moment, it was a moment of revelation that God is being revealed to humanity through the person of Jesus Christ. And that through his departure, that mankind could be redeemed from their sin. This was a powerful moment that is taking place. And now when you hear of the word revelation, it simply means to reveal or to make known. I love what John says when he's speaking about Jesus in John 1:18. He says, no one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known. So through Jesus, you and I can understand who God is. We can understand the nature and character of God through the person of Jesus. But we also can understand that the person of Jesus is much more than a character that we read about in a book. No, he is the fulfillment of God's plan for the world. He is the one that came to set you and I free from sin. He's the one that came to change our hearts. He's the one that came to redeem us and to restore us to a relationship with God the Father. And through Jesus being the revelation of God, you and I can experience all that God desires for a broken, for a hurting, and for a sinful world. It's here that we see that for God so loved the world that what did he do? He sent his only Son so that nobody could perish but all could have eternal life. The revelation of God through the person of Jesus Christ is simply this, that Jesus came to change your life here on this earth, but he also came to prepare you for eternity with him. That's the significance this morning. And again, Jesus is revealed in such a powerful way to the three disciples, yet they're not even fully aware of what is going on in the moment. They're not even comprehending the significance of this moment. And I don't know if you're like me, but there's moments where I read the scriptures and I think, why on earth did they do that? Because if I would have been there, I obviously would have done things different. That I don't know why they said that. I don't know why they acted like that. And I would like to think that I would do a better job and not fall asleep to miss out on Jesus being glorified in front of everybody. But how often has God revealed himself to us in moments, yet we've missed it? That you can be struggling with some sin issues in your life, and yet because of the condemnation, because of the weight, because of the pressure, because of the urge and the temptation, we will miss out on the reality that Jesus is being revealed to us to save us from our sin. Or you can be going through marriage problems. You can be struggling in any area of your life. And we come into an environment like this, and God is moving and God is working on people's lives. And yet we still miss the moment because we're so preconceived with all of these different things in our mind. How many moments have we missed that God desired to show himself and change us in that moment? And this is what I believe. Jesus is made known to us so our lives can be made new. Jesus doesn't want you staying the same. He doesn't want you staying in your sin. He doesn't want you staying in your struggles. He wants to make himself known to you so that your life can change. And the good news this morning is that Jesus came to give us the life that we could not gain on our own. He came to give us everything that you and I can't fulfill. He came to give us life. His death and resurrection brought our redemption. His suffering brought our freedom. And it's through Jesus that you and I don't have to leave this morning walking through life broken and bound, but rather we can leave this morning walking through life whole and free. That's the significance of Jesus being revealed to you this morning. And this moment of revelation is a key moment for you and I. That Jesus desires to change us and desires to make us new. Not only was the Transfiguration a moment of invitation or a moment of revelation, but lastly, it was a moment of attention. I want to read verses 35 and 36. Luke writes, "Then a voice from the cloud said, 'This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him.' And when the voice finished, Jesus was there alone." In this moment, everybody's overshadowed by a cloud, which a cloud symbolized God's presence. It represented God's presence. The disciples are terrified, and the Father speaks from the cloud, similar to Jesus' baptism that we talked about last week. But in this moment, there are two unique things that are happening. Number one, the Father tells the disciples to listen to Jesus. But then secondly, Moses and Elijah leaving Peter, James, and John with just Jesus. And I love what Matthew's account says. He shares it this way. Matthew 17, verse 8. "And when they looked up, Moses and Elijah were gone, and they saw only Jesus." In this moment, God the Father, he's drawing attention to God the Son, Jesus being greater than anything, greater than anyone. Many scholars believe this point in the story, it magnifies the greatness of the Transfiguration because all the attention is put on Jesus at this point. That he's the only one that remains. And the Transfiguration, it was a key moment in the life of Christ, but it's a key moment in the disciples, but it can also be a key moment for you and I this morning because it shows us that Jesus must be the center of attention in our lives. That he has to be the one that remains supreme in every area of our life. But I find it powerful that everybody leaves and Jesus is the only one that's there. And there's something about having an experience with God where everything begins to fade in that moment. And the whole focus of our life and our mind and our soul gets put simply on Jesus. And it's in that moment that he takes the center stage in our life. And it's in settings like this where you can bring your fear, where you can bring your worry, where you can bring your anxiety, where you can bring your sin. And what you discover in that moment, that God is not beating you over the head for what you're dealing with, but rather our attention moves from the struggle that we have and the things pertaining to our life, and the attention of our soul gets put on Christ. And it's in that moment that we realize that there's nothing that's greater than Jesus, that there's no one that compares to him. And in our lives, we get so fixated on what we have that we forget that Jesus is what remains. That Jesus is the only thing that's going to be there when that person walks out on you. That Jesus is going to be there whenever that job falls through. Whenever your world has crumbled, Jesus is the only one that's going to be there, that will remain after everything else. And in our lives, it's not if everything crumbles or if people leave, but it's when everything crumbles. And it's when people leave that we realize that even though they left, and even though that fell through, and even though my life feels like it's in shambles, that Jesus is still there. That he's been faithful even when I've been faithless. That he's walked through this journey with me even when I didn't even know he was there. Jesus is still there. And maybe this morning in your life, you've walked into this room facing failure, disappointment, or maybe some heartbreak in your life. And the problem with all those is oftentimes it causes us to wonder, is anybody there? And does anybody care? Because if anybody knew what I was fully going through, then they would walk with me through this. Is anybody there? Does anybody care? And it's in those seasons that the one that remains is Jesus. The one that has stayed consistent in your life has been Jesus. The one that has been faithful to fulfill everything in your life, friend, is Jesus. But for Peter, the one that has blurted out whenever he shouldn't have, the one that's done some pretty silly stuff, the one that's made some mistakes, the one that dozed off at a really important moment in Jesus' life. As he's writing 2 Peter, right before he's about to die for his faith in Christ, he reflects back on the Transfiguration. Now, this is 30 to 40 years later. As he's reflecting about that moment, notice what he says in 2 Peter 1:19. Because of that experience, the Transfiguration, we have even greater confidence in the message proclaimed by the prophets. Notice what he says. You must pay close attention to what they wrote. For their words are like a lamp shining in a dark place until the day dawns and Christ, the morning star, shines in your hearts. It's the Transfiguration that confirms everything that was written about Jesus in that moment. And Peter's attention is so captured by Jesus that he's still thinking about it 30 to 40 years later. Think about the significance of that moment. How significant that was. Why? Because Jesus had captivated his heart so much. And it's through the Transfiguration of Jesus that you and I can see that despite our frailty, despite how fragile life can be, that Jesus remains the centerpiece when everything else fails. It is He is who our attention belongs to. So my question this morning is, has He captured your attention? Or better yet, when was the last time that Jesus captured your attention? Because you might have come in here dealing with some things, and just because of the busyness of life and everything on your plate, that oftentimes what happens in our life is Jesus gets put to the side. So when was the last time that He actually captivated everything about your heart, where He was number one in your life? Because this key moment of Jesus capturing your attention, friend, it can make the difference in every area of your life. That's why the writer of Hebrews would say, let us fix our eyes on Jesus. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus. With every head bowed, every eye closed.